Deku? I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Chapter 36. Conversation and Preparation. And the fourth team advancing to the finals is... Midnight checked the scoreboard one final time. Team Midoriya. Wow! Midoriya is really on fire today! Winning first in the first round and only losing his lead in the final minutes of the cavalry battles! Mike screamed. If you haven't figured it out already, ladies and gentlemen, this student is one to watch! Any comments, Eraserhead? Only that Deku is known for his intelligence. He may not have a flashy quirk, but he more than makes up for it in skill in exploiting his opponent's weaknesses. It will be interesting to see what he does in the next round, as well as how his opponents deal with someone who can outthink them. Oh, I'm so excited I'm getting chills! We're gonna have a break for lunch, but don't party too hard, people! Preparations for the next round begin in an hour! Izuku didn't really know what was going on. Todoroki had stalked over to him right as he'd finally managed to control his celebratory tears, told him they needed to talk, then walked away. Izuku had followed him, of course, but Todoroki had led him to a shady tunnel, then proceeded to just stare at him. It had already passed the okay stage, landed in the solidly weird, and was fast approaching creepy. You made me break my oath. I didn't mean to... What? Todoroki scowled and looked at his left hand. That moment when you came after me in the cavalry battle, I felt so overwhelmed that I broke... I made a promise to myself a long time ago that I'd never use his fire. My father is the pro-hero Endeavor. With how much you know about everything, I have no doubt you've heard of him and must know he's the number 2 hero. Since you're involved with so many pro-heroes, that means I have even more reason to beat you. My old man is ambitious, but he was never able to best All Might. He's determined to beat him, though, one way or another. Izuku frowned. On the outside, it seemed like a typical hero rivalry. Pretty common, especially among the upper ranks. But something about the way Todoroki was talking made it sound like there was something Izuku was missing. What are you trying to say, Todoroki? Have you heard of quirk marriages? They were popular back at the dawn of quirks and were clearly unethical, but that didn't stop my old man. He's got plenty of money to throw at his problems and paid off my mother's family so he'd get his hands on her quirk. From the moment I was born, he's seen me as a tool to usurp All Might. Izuku was horrified. Was this what Nezu had meant when he said that some villains were able to hide their true nature? Izuku thought that he meant people like his old school, or even some of the more popular vigilantes, but if Todoroki was telling the truth, then... In every memory I have of my mother, she's crying. She called my left side unbearable before throwing boiling water on my face. My father doesn't think fighting you is worth my time, since you don't have a powerful quirk. While it's true you'll never be number 1, you're skilled and well-connected. You're the top student in our class when it comes to strategy. I picked a fight with you to prove that I don't need his damn fire quirk to be the best. I'm gonna show him I reject his power, and I can take first place without using it. What was he supposed to say to that? Yeah, Todoroki ate lunch with them, but Izuku didn't think that was a close enough relationship to share childhood trauma. But it hurt to see Todoroki holding himself back, just because his father was a villain. Did you know that the villains offered me a quirk back at the USJ? Todoroki's eyes widened. No. What does that have to do? Izuku chuckled. I understand why you're hesitant to use your fire quirk, Todoroki, but the thing you need to remember is that it's your quirk. I have my own reasons for wanting to be a quirkless hero, but when Shigaraki said that his boss could give me a quirk, there was a moment where I was tempted. If he'd offered it to me a year ago, I might have even said yes. If I had accepted that, do you think my quirk would have been a villain's quirk? Todoroki thought for a moment. No. Knowing you, whatever it was, you'd find a way to use it for good. But it would have been given to me by a villain, Izuku argued. But what matters is what you do with it. Exactly. Izuku smiled as Todoroki processed his revelation. Todoroki, your father might have been a villain in disguise, and yeah, maybe you inherited his quirk, but if I had been given a quirk by the League of Villains, it would have still been my quirk, and I could still use it to become a hero. Your left side is yours, not your father's, Todoroki. Izuku chuckled as Todoroki looked at him in shock. So, you can see why someone like me, who has been kicked down my whole life for not having a quirk, might be a little upset when someone who has not one but two amazing quirks holds themselves back simply because they don't like where they got their power. I'm not saying you have to use your fire, Todoroki, but I hope that eventually you can use it for good, without even thinking of the man who gave it to you. Izuku nodded and walked off to join the others for lunch, leaving Todoroki propped up against the wall to think about what he'd said. Hey, Kirishima! Kaminari jogged up to him as they were about to go to lunch. I need your help with something. What is it, man? Well, before the festival, Mineta and I came up with this awesome plan to trick the girls into wearing cheerleading outfits. We were gonna go up to them during lunch and tell them it was all Aizawa's idea, but Mineta's still in Recovery Girl's office with how badly he got hurt in the first round, and there's no way they'll believe me if I try to pull this off alone. So what do you say? Help a brother out? Kaminari. Dude, tricking people isn't manly at all. Come on! Kaminari groaned. Don't you want to see those hot babes in those skimpy outfits? Kirishima shrugged. Honestly, man, I'm not even sure I'm into girls. Let's just go to lunch and leave the girls alone. Maybe if we eat quickly enough, we'll have time to visit Mineta before the next round. Hitoshi stood slightly apart from the other finalists as they waited for midnight to give instructions for the final round. He'd made it. It felt so surreal. Now all he had to do was win. Congratulations to the 4 teams who made it to the final round, Midnight purred. Come closer and draw lots to see who you're up against. Excuse me! All eyes turned to Ojiro. I'd like to withdraw. What? Ojiro looked down at the floor. I barely remember anything from the cavalry battle until the very end of it. I think it was that guy's quirk. Ojiro glared at Hitoshi, who looked away. He'd been afraid something like this might happen when he brainwashed his own team. He'd been expecting it even, but it still hurt. Why couldn't the guy just accept his place in the tournament and be grateful? I was just someone's puppet, Ojiro continued. I don't want to advance if I don't even know how I got here. This is about my pride. The shorter kid from 1B also stepped forward. I think I should withdraw for the same reason. This isn't how I wanted to be here. You can't make an omelette without cracking a few eggs, Hitoshi reminded himself. It didn't matter that he had to take advantage of a few people to move on, and he couldn't afford to feel guilty about it. This was just the price he had to pay to get into the hero course, right? How incredibly naive, boys. Midnight cracked a whip. It turns me on. You're out. In the end, it was decided that the 2 members from Team Tetsu Tetsu would move on instead. Hopefully, they didn't remember how he'd managed to brainwash them, but then again there was also the possibility each of them would lose their matches and he would never have to fight them. Either would be fine. The 16 of them drew numbers from a box Midnight was holding, and Shinso drew number 1. Did that mean he was going first? Was he ready for this? Who would he be facing? Take a look at the bracket, my dears. Hitoshi looked up at the screen. Midoriya. He was going to be facing off against the 10 million point guy? If he'd managed to beat Bakugo and Todoroki in the first round, he probably had an even better quirk than they did, even if he hadn't shown it off for some reason. Did he just think he was better than everyone else? Look at me. I don't even have to use my quirk to beat you. Hitoshi hated guys like that. Oh well, it'd just make it all the more satisfying when he ordered Midoriya to walk out of bounds. But first, he had to find a way to get under his skin. Getting him to respond right now wouldn't do any good, since the connection would wear off by the time the match began, but Hitoshi still needed to figure out what Midoriya cared about so he knew what to talk about in the match. Hitoshi walked up to Midoriya as he was studying the bracket. That is you, right? Izuku Midoriya? Midoriya jumped, and Hitoshi could tell he recognized him from that time he declared war on 1A. Good. That meant he was already off balance. You excited? Not so fast. Ojiro whipped his tail over Midoriya's mouth, and Hitoshi had to resist the urge to scowl. If Tailboy told Midoriya about his quirk, it'd be that much harder to get him to talk. He reminded himself to stay calm, and act like he had all the power. He couldn't let Midoriya think he had a chance of winning. So he smiled instead, and let out a short laugh, before turning and walking away. Darn it. Ojiro dragged Izuku to a prep room, and Izuku wondered what it was that made people want him to drag him to places. Seriously, this was the second time today. Hopefully, Ojiro didn't drop any bombs on him like Todoroki had, because Izuku was still trying to figure out what he was supposed to do with the fact that Endeavor was actually abusive. He shook his head. He couldn't think about that right now. He had to figure out how he was going to beat Shinso. What was that about back there, Ojiro? Ojiro glanced around the room to make sure no one was listening. It's about Shinso's quirk. I think it makes him some sort of puppeteer. All I know is I wasn't the one calling the shots in the second round. His quirk allows him to control other people? What were the limits of a quirk like that? Could he control people's minds or just their bodies? If he could make people talk, he would be really good at information gathering. That was such a cool quirk, and he had to fight it. Can I beat something like that? Yes, by not giving him a chance to use it, Ojiro said. He asked me a question before the second round, so I think he got into my head when I answered. So, if I say anything, I'll lose. Ojiro shrugged. Even if he gets you, there's still a chance. I woke up when I bumped into someone at the end of the cavalry battle. It's only a guess, but I hope it helps. Izuku nodded. Thanks, Ojiro. You're a really great guy. By the time Ojiro had left, it was already time for Izuku to grab his weapons and head into the tunnel to wait for the match. If Shinso were a villain, and Izuku had time to prep, he'd wear some sort of watch that would vibrate hard enough to wake him up every 30 seconds or so. But he didn't have the time or skills to make something like that right now. And even if he did, the only weapons he had approved were a gun and a knife, neither of which would wake him up. Maybe if I hold my knife loosely by the blade, Izuku muttered. There's a chance that my hand might clench around it when he takes control, so that can be a fail-safe. It'd still be better to just avoid talking, though. It shouldn't be too hard, right? But what if he got caught anyway? What if he couldn't win? Hey, kiddo. You nervous? Joke laughed when Izuku jumped a foot in the air. I'll take that as a yes. Sorry for scaring you. I just wanted to wish you luck. You didn't scare me, Izuku denied. I was just lost in my own thoughts, I guess. Joke nodded. If my brain was that big, I'd get lost too. But seriously, are you okay? Izuku sighed. It's just... what happens if I lose? I'm not gonna lie, kiddo. It happens sometimes. Izuku glared at her. Real helpful, thanks. Joke laughed. I know, but competitions are like that. This is the UA Sports Festival, kiddo. And these kids you're up against are the best of the best. You've got to give it your all, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to lose, and that somebody just might be you. But if I lose, then it'll just be proof that a quirkless kid can never be a hero. Joke flicked him on the nose. Stop that. Whether you go out there and win this, or you go out there and trip on your own shoelaces, you are capable of being a hero. You proved that when you went literally flying into first place during the obstacle course. Thanks for the heart attack there, by the way. And you proved it again when you held onto your headband minutes longer than anyone expected during the cavalry battle. I've been in the stands this whole time, kiddo, and you've managed to impress people despite the high expectations they already had for Deku the Analyst. So, don't go getting into your head that no one will believe you can't be a hero if you don't get into first place. The only people that are going to think that after what you did today are the ones that wouldn't believe you could be a hero no matter how many times you proved yourself. You got that? Izuku wiped tears from his eyes. Yeah, loud and clear. Good. Joke smiled and ruffled his hair. Now knock him dead, Deku. I gotta get back to the stands. Izuku watched her leave before turning back towards the field. He'd already proved that he could be a hero, and he had some of the best heroes he'd ever met cheering him on. He could do this. Let's cut to the good stuff, alright? Mike's voice echoed over the cheers as Izuku stepped out of the tunnel onto the field. Please welcome our first fighters. It's the kid who made a name for himself helping heroes, Izuku Deku Midoriya from the Hero Course, versus Shinso Itoshi from General Education, who really hasn't done anything to stand out yet. Is everybody ready? Midnight asked. Begin. Chapter 37. Deku vs. Shinso. Shinso really was intimidating, wasn't he? From where Izuku was standing, he just looked bored, almost as if he already knew he was gonna win. Izuku grabbed the knife from his hip and held it loosely in his left hand, making sure a few of his fingers were touching the blade so he'd cut him if his hand tightened slightly. Not the best backup plan, but he didn't know a lot about Shinso's quirk, so it was the best he could do for now. Shinso scowled at him as Midnight announced the beginning of the match. Using weapons, huh? It's not enough that you've got amazing quirk that you refused to show us during the other rounds. Now you think you can ignore the rules? I heard recommendation students were entitled, but this is something else. Izuku opened his mouth to correct him, but slammed it shut when he remembered he was supposed to stay silent. Shinso was just trying to bait him. In a way, Shinso drawled, this is a test of how strong your spirit is. If you know what you want your future to hold for you, you can't care what other people think. That monkey was going on about his pride earlier, but I just think he's an idiot. Don't talk about him that way, Izuku growled, and ran forward before a chill ran through him. He froze, and the knife fell to the floor as his hand went completely limp. So much for that idea. Shinso smirked. I win. What's this? Mike yelled. Could this be a quirk at work? Shinso seems to have Midoriya completely stunned. Izuku tried to move his fingers, his face, anything, but he obviously wasn't in control anymore. Why hadn't he kept his mouth shut? This is the perfect example of why the entrance exam isn't rational, Aizawa said. Izuku felt his heart drop. Ereza was going to be so disappointed in him. He didn't even deserve to be here, did he? Since we're on to the individual rounds, I had some information compiled about our final competitors, Aizawa continued. Shinso failed the practical examination to get into the hero course, but he probably knew that would happen, so he applied to general education as well. His quirk is incredibly strong, but since that test consisted of fighting robots, Shinso never stood a chance. Deku himself only managed to get into the hero course because the recommendation exam was slightly different. He wouldn't have been well suited to fighting robots either, despite the skill we saw from him in previous rounds. This particular mashup was never going to result in a flashy battle. You're lucky to have been so blessed, Midoriya, Shinso said. Now walk out of bounds like a good little hero. To his dismay, Izuku obeyed. His brain felt foggy, but he knew that even if he was thinking at full speed, he wouldn't be able to get out of this. Why had he fallen for it? Even after Ojiro had warned him. Now no one was going to believe he could be a hero. Wait. That wasn't quite right, was it? He thought back to his conversation with Joke before the match. She believed in him, as did Brave and Nighteye and Eraserhead. And according to what she'd said, the other heroes believed in him too. He'd shown he was capable of being a hero in the obstacle course and the cavalry battle, but Shinso hadn't really had a chance to stand out in the same way, had he? Even with a quirk like this, I have my own great dreams of becoming a hero, Shinso said. So lose for me. Izuku tried one more time to stop walking, but of course that didn't work. He didn't understand what Shinso had meant about his quirk, though. His quirk was perfect for hero work, and it honestly felt kind of cool. Joke was right. In a competition, there was always going to be a winner and a loser, and this time, it was his turn to lose. Izuku's feet stepped over the line. Midoriya is out of bounds! Shinso advances to the next match! Hitoshi let his control fall. He'd done it. He'd beaten a kid from the hero course. His eyes widened, and he took a step back as he realized Midoriya was literally running at him. Oh no, that wasn't good. Midnight wouldn't let him be beat up after the match was over, right? Or did that not apply to Gen Ed students? Wait, was Midoriya smiling? Oh my goodness, that was so cool! I have so many questions. How many people can you control at once? How long can you control them? I wish I had a notebook right now. How complicated can your commands be? What? You're not mad? Hitoshi stared at him in disbelief. What? No, your quirk is just really cool. Deku. Eraserhead's voice sounded amused over the speakers. Can you find someplace else to geek out over Shinso's quirk? We need the field for the next match. Midoriya looked at the announcement booth and gave a full arm wave. Sorry, Eraser! He grabbed Hitoshi by the arm and dragged him back to the student areas. He followed along limply. First, because he wasn't entirely convinced that Midoriya wouldn't beat him up if he fought back, and second, because he didn't really know what was happening. Why was Midoriya so happy? Didn't he realize that he'd lost? It wasn't until they reached one of the prep rooms that Midoriya seemed to realize that kidnapping a classmate probably wasn't the best thing to do, and quickly let go of him. I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize. I was just really excited and... Why are you acting like this? Shinso snapped. You're supposed to be angry with me for brainwashing you and making you lose the match. You should be dragging me away to beat me up, not to have a conversation. Midoriya tilted his head. But it's a competition. You were supposed to try to beat me and you did. Why would I be mad at you for that? Hitoshi stared at him. Because you lost. Midoriya shrugged. I mean, I'm sad I lost, obviously, but between the two of us, I think it's probably better that you won. The main point of the sports festival is to impress the pros, right? Since I've already worked with a lot of pros and did well in the first 2 rounds, I probably won't have any problems getting an internship. You, on the other hand, didn't have any of that. So, well, I do wish I'd made it further in the tournament. I'm glad that you get more chances to show everyone what you can do.
You're a weird kid, Midoriya.
Yeah. Midoriya chuckled nervously. Kinda.
Hitoshi was quiet for a moment. So what is your quirk, anyway? I think it's strange that someone born with a perfect heroic quirk refused to use it at all in the first 2 rounds.
Midoriya blinked at him, then started laughing so hard, Hitoshi almost wondered that one hero with the laughter quirk, Miss Joke, had managed to sneak back here and use her quirk on him. Was Midoriya making fun of him? And he'd just been starting to think Midoriya was one of the good ones. Hitoshi glared at him as he struggled to get himself.
If you don't want to tell me, that's your choice. But it sure is rude to mock me for asking.
No, it's just... Midoriya gasped. I'm quirkless.
What?
Midoriya held his sides as he finally managed to stop laughing. Yeah, I've got the extra tojo and everything. Sorry for laughing, I just...
No.
Hitoshi stared at him in disbelief.
There's no way you're quirkless. How did you even get into the hero course?
Well, the practical exam for recommendation students was an obstacle course, and I don't know if you noticed. Midoriya smirked. But I'm pretty darn good at those. Hitoshi chuckled.
How did a quirkless kid get recommended anyway? Sorry, is that rude to ask?
Midoriya shrugged. It's okay. It's kind of a weird situation. I've wanted to be a hero my whole life, but for obvious reasons, no one really believed in me. Sorry, that probably sounds like I'm looking for pity or something.
No, I get it, Hitoshi said quickly. I, get a lot of hate for having a villain's quirk, so... yeah. I can't even imagine what it must be like for you.
If it means anything, I think your quirk is perfect for heroes, Midoriya said. But then again, I think any quirk would be good for heroics. If I'd been born with the ability to change my eye color, I'm pretty sure I still would have found a way to be a hero with it. Anyway, I started analyzing hero fights, hoping it would make up for my lack of quirk. On a whim, I reached out to some underground heroes and offered them my analysis, and it kinda just snowballed from there. I got really lucky.
Yeah, you did. Just not in the way I expected.
Hitoshi stopped.
Wait a minute. Why were you so worried about getting to the finals if you weren't worried about getting an internship? Are you just super competitive or something?
Midoriya chuckled and rubbed the back of his neck. No. I wanted to prove to everyone that I was able to compete on the same level as kids with quirks.
Oh,
Hitoshi said eloquently. He'd just blown Midoriya's one chance to prove everyone wrong.
Sorry.
Midoriya shook his head. Like I said, don't worry about it. If I had to lose to anyone, I'm glad it was someone like you. With your quirk, I would have lost even if I had a quirk, so nobody will be able to use my loss as proof I shouldn't be a hero. What about you? I'm assuming you're trying for the hero course. Hitoshi nodded. He trailed off as the door to the prep room slammed open, and Todoroki, the one with the ice quirk, if Hitoshi remembered correctly, stalked in and stood in front of Midoriya.
You were supposed to win.
Midoriya smiled sheepishly up at him. Sorry, Todoroki. What are you doing here? I thought you had a match.
It's already over. It was a fast match, but they're taking a break to finish melting the ice.
Midoriya nodded. I was wondering why it was so cold.
Don't change the subject, Midoriya.
Todoroki seemed to be glaring at Midoriya, but his expression hadn't changed the whole conversation, so that might just be his natural expression. Hitoshi didn't know, and he kind of felt like an outsider in the situation.
I was going to beat you.
I'm really sorry, Todoroki, but... Midoriya smiled brightly, and Hitoshi found himself being pushed forward. This is Shinso. He's the one who beat me, so you'll just have to transfer your declaration of war to him instead. Oh no. This was not what Hitoshi signed up for. Was this Midoriya's plan? Act all buddy-buddy so his guard was down, then recruit the strongest kid in the grade to kill him? Todoroki looked him up and down.
You're strong.
Was that a question? Was he supposed to answer? Hitoshi glanced over at Midoriya, who smiled encouragingly. He gulped, then turned back to Todoroki, and nodded.
Good. You're not the only one with something to prove, so no matter how strong you are, I will beat you.
Hitoshi nodded because what was he supposed to say to that? And Todoroki turned around and walked out of the room. Midoriya gave him a brilliant smile. I better get going so you can concentrate. Good luck on your next match. He followed Todoroki out the door, and Hitoshi was left gaping at nothing. Had the guy who could freeze their entire grade just declared war on him? He almost wished he'd lost to Midoriya. Then he wouldn't have to worry about what he was going to do in his next match. He was so screwed. Hey, it's Mika. If you enjoyed this podfic, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel or following me on Spotify for updates and new content weekly. Also, consider supporting me on Ko-Fi, link in the description. Anyways, I hope that you have a great day or night, and that your favorite author posts the exact fanfiction you visualized when you were meant to be doing work yesterday. Until next time.